Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to a brand new episode of this podcast. This week, I was given the wonderful opportunity to be able to have a conversation with Jade. Now, myself and Jade are both marketers, and of course, we then got to talk about marketing. But we also got to talk about culture. We also got to talk about how removing or moving to remote working has been really interesting and exciting, and how we can keep that culture through that remote process as well. So thank you ever so much for coming back and joining me once again. I'll now hand over to Jade to explain a little bit more about what she does, and I'll see you very, very soon.
I'm Jade from Rebellion Marketing. We do everything marketing. It kind of says what we do on the tin, really. Our business has been running for 2 years, trading for 2 years, officially in business for 3 years, but that's a story I'll tell you in a minute. Don't get drunk and start a business is the answer to that question. So we do everything from kind of your SEO type stuff, technical, digital marketing, right through to social media management and everything in between.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for the time, Jade. I really appreciate it because I know how busy you are. So, just want to thank you firstly. But the reason why I wanted you to come on, I think is the reason why I start with asking this question is because everyone asks me, well, why me? Right? Like, why did you want me to have a conversation? I think there's so many misconceptions in marketing. I mean, as you know, we do video mostly, but there's so much crossover in that because we're all in the marketing umbrella, right? And I think there's so much opportunity at the moment, but also so much misunderstanding necessarily on what the job of marketing is to do and then how it's going to serve a business, right? So, before we get into that, what was your, because I'm curious on your origin story now, because you've kind of, it's interesting. So how did you, when you say don't get drunk and start a business, what does that mean? I'm really curious.
Well, basically, this whole business was started on a drunken night out. So both me and my business partner, who's not my business partner anymore, basically went out on a night out. So we'd known each other since school, had a few beers, and went, oh, should we start a marketing agency? Because we were just fed up, basically, with what was going on, where we were working, in terms of not necessarily where we were working. That sounds horrible. They're great businesses, but the service that we were getting from marketing agencies as internal marketeers, or I was actually sales employer account director type role, but marketing featured very heavily in what I was doing, and the service we were getting was just shit, to be honest. Just absolute nonsense. Some of these people talk like, we'll get you to number one on Google next week. Bollocks, no you won't. So we basically got drunk and went, yeah, fuck it, let's start a marketing agency, and that's what we did.
Fantastic. I mean, I think it kind of goes into this whole when's the best time to take the leap? When's the best time to do this, right? And I'm sure we can get into that, but just building off the question I asked you before the origin story part, in your perspective, what is the point in people doing marketing?
Obviously, there is a huge point. So I think for me, it really depends on the business, but generally speaking, it's so that your brand awareness is increased and you eventually get more bums on seats, more leads through your door. But it does vary on the business. Some more traditional businesses take a view of marketing very much as just that brand awareness piece. They're not overly looking for it to deliver in terms of masses of leads to them, and they just want it so that if someone picks up the phone and says, I want your service, they can then jump on a website, they can go on social media and just build that trust from the fact that, oh, okay, yeah, the website's quite decent. Oh, there's some good information on Facebook. But for most of us, actually, we want some leads, right? We want to be visible. We want to be number one. When someone thinks of your product, your brand, you want to be the person that they think about rather than your competitor. So if you're not doing any kind of marketing, then are you going to get any business? Probably not. And that also feeds nicely into for me, marketing is everything that comes before you actually have that qualified lead at your door. And then once the sale has even taken place, marketing happens after that as well. So it's everything but the actual conversion of a sale, I believe.
Yeah, and I really resonate that because I think there's a misconception sometimes that you do marketing, it's going to guarantee you're going to get more work. It's going to guarantee you're going to get more sales. I'm like, well, that's sales, right? Like, surely that's sales, not marketing. From my perspective, as you articulated, is marketing is that kind of constant beacon of like, hey, this is what I do. Hey, this is what I do. Hey, this is what I do. And I was just in a call with a copywriter talking about how to stay visible online and what to do and how to do that. And I think it's really important. And I think the keys there, for me anyway, is be consistent in what you're doing, and then, but also the timing around what you're doing, but then also understanding who your ideal client is, right? So who are those leads? I think, have you found that people sometimes find it really challenging to work out who their target audience is at the start?
Yeah, 100%. So most people come to us with a rough idea, but I cannot tell you how many times we have the conversation around who's your target audience? Oh, well, everybody. And it's just not true. And I say this time and time again. But even if you're selling Loo Roll, not everyone's ass is the same. So you're not going to be selling to everyone. Even if you sell the most commoditized item or product, you still need to know who your target audience is. So yeah, I think people do find that difficult, and a lot of people do genuinely think that, well, we can service everybody. I mean, technically, a marketing agency can service everybody, but from our point of view, we're not going to be for everybody because we're quite rebellious. We don't like to do things that are, standard marketing. We do obviously do that, your baseline marketing, making sure everything's running nice and consistently and smoothly. But our main thing is let's try something new. Let's think outside the box. Let's do something different. So, and that's not for everyone. Some people just want to stay in their cozy little box of a couple of posts on social media and that's it. So yeah, so everyone's got a different audience, and yes, most people find it very difficult to work out who is their audience for sure.
I think it's a really common thing because, but I also think part of the reason why people find that very hard is because they feel like they have to know exactly who the age of these people are. They have to know exactly all those age old questions of who is the age demographic, are they male or female, where do they locate, blah 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 blah. But personally, for me, I think it's more common than that. It's not as detailed as that. Of course, you can get that if you want to get ad specific and you want to really go detailed and targeting. Sure, but I think in a general point of view, it's just simply asking the question of who do you want to have more conversations with that could make you, that could have work for you, right? Or could generate more revenue for you. And I think, how did you, from your own marketing or from a client perspective, help them develop that language or develop that understanding to actually know who that person is? I mean, do you have a system? Is there like, because for me, I think it's really important when you do any kind of content like this is to give as much back as humanly possible, so that there's a reason why someone should tune in and there's a reason why someone should technically listen, because we're asking for people's time and energy and resources here. No, we're not asking for money, but we're asking for their energy and their time, right?
Oh, well, absolutely. Well, first of all, people should listen to this because I'm fucking hilarious. That's reason enough. But anyway, in terms of audience, I think generally how we start, if it depends on whether they are an absolutely fresh business or not. If you're absolutely fresh out the box business, just launched, yeah, it's going to be very fucking hard to figure out who your actual audience is. You've got no data to play with, you've got no historical purchases, you've got no top clients, you've got no nothing. So how do you figure that out? And initially, it's testing the water. It's okay, let's just get down on paper who we think that this product is going to be for. And that's usually the best place to start. The obvious place is, okay, so you've got this, I don't know, a pill pot. Okay, who do we know that takes tablets a lot? Okay, it tends to be people that are slightly older, so probably going to target those as a starting point. And you slowly begin to build up different aspects of your audience as you grow. So once you've got 6 months down the line, particularly if you're running things like ads, but if you've got, Google Analytics on, you're working on your socials and you're analyzing what you're doing, you can very quickly pick up, okay, so we initially thought that it would be those types of people, but actually it's not at all. It's totally different demographic and it's over here. So the starting place is always the obvious, and that is, who do you think it is? If you've already got an established business, it is much easier, obviously, because you've got historical data, who's already bought for you, you know who your best clients are, you know what your margins look like and what that client looks like. So it's much easier then to develop your audience and go, okay, we know this is who we want to target, this is how much they're likely to spend with us, this is how old they are, and all of those kind of nitty gritty bits. But in the first instance, exactly what you said is it sounds crazy, but it's pretty obvious. I don't think there's any like nuances to it or any kind of secrets. it's likely who you think it is.
Yeah, and I really think it's important because when people are in a business or they have clients, of course, then they know roughly, right? Because who's bought from you before. But at the start, and that's why I'm really glad that you mentioned it, you have to just put stuff out there and try it, right? Like we say it with video all the time. Just start putting video out there because you're never going to build the formats, or you're never going to have a podcast, or you're never going to have an interview, or you're never going to have whatever style of content, which will lead into my next question, if you don't do it, right? If you don't do that first step of content. But that's very well enough. That's very well and good for us saying this because we both are quite seasoned in creating content, right? Like we both run a level of a marketing agency and we both create content for clients or ourselves pretty regularly. So we're pretty seasoned in that concept. But what advice would you give to someone who isn't seasoned, right? So they're not in the marketing world, but they don't necessarily have the budget to pay someone to do it, but they know they should be like, they listen to this and go, actually, okay, I need to do some marketing, right? I need to start creating some content. I need to put stuff out there into the world. I mean, where would you suggest that people do start to actually try and start doing that?
Market research, without a doubt. If you've absolutely got no clue who your audience is, perhaps you've just had this fantastic idea for a product, but actually, who's going to buy it? You've never been in marketing before, you've never run a business before, all of that you've got to do your market research. So whether that be kind of setting up some survey monkey type stuff and just getting your friends, family, Facebook connections, whatever it is, to answer that as much as possible, to start building up a bit of a picture of who that audience is, or it's kind of looking at your competitors. I mean, there's lots of bits of software that you can use for free. SEMrush, I believe, which is an SEO tool, have a free version that you can use, as do Moz, and there's a couple of others. So just starting from that point of view, on SEMrush, for example, you can stick in your competitors' URL and it will tell you kind of what they're ranking for, and lots of different information about that particular person. So if you know who your competitors are, which is probably more likely than knowing who your audience is, that is a good place to start. Have a little look on their social media channels as well. What are they doing on Facebook? What are they doing on Instagram? Are they channels that they're even using? Because that's kind of a big question as well. If you're looking at targeting, for example, anyone over 60, are they going to be on TikTok? They might be, but it's highly unlikely that's where the majority of your audience are going to be. So working out what channels your competitors are using as well is a good starting point. Start building up that picture of who it is that you are going to want to target and how, as well.
And I think it's really important and really powerful once you can start analyzing the market, which is what you're talking about there, but also feeling okay about doing that because I think sometimes morally we're like, surely this is cheating or etc. Right? And I think it is and it isn't. I think analysing the market, and we always play this like egg and chicken situation in marketing or in general, whenever you build any business, where someone will come up with an amazing idea and then you're kind of questioning, do I hold this to myself or do I put it out there? Because the second you put it out there, your competitors are going to go, oh, that's a good idea, let's grab that. But I think the core there is actually understanding that it doesn't matter because the people who resonate with you and I perhaps are not going to be the people who don't, they're going to resonate with us. There's also going to be a set of people who don't, right? It could be, oh no, she swears, or oh no, she says it this way, oh no, she says how it is, or we can't have that. To some people, that's going to be a big no-no, right? But that's okay because you're not going to necessarily want to work with those people anyway as a business owner. So I think taking the fundamentals of what works and sharing them out actually helps you, from what I found. And I think that's why we create as much content as we do, and that's why this entire podcast is designed to be a resource for people who are starting out, who are in the position where they don't know necessarily what to do, how to create content, how to get started, because it wasn't content which I had at the beginning when I started, right? There was no one that I could see, because it wasn't really until the last couple of years, maybe 3 or 4 years, where people were really leaning into, you do a podcast, you do a piece of video, you do this, you do that, then you cut it up, then you put it on social as reels, then you put it in this, and we can get really complicated and really Venn diagram about it if you want. But the reality of the fact is people weren't really creating as much content as they are nowadays in comparison, like 5 years ago, right?
Oh yeah. Well, I reckon even you could probably even go back 2 years ago, and it wasn't as content heavy as it is now. So yeah, I Totally agree with that. And it does seem daunting, I think, to people that just have never done it, just don't even know where to start. And we get an awful lot of that. It's like even people actually that have got businesses they've had for 5 years plus, 6, 10 years even. It's like we know that we need to get digital now, or even start marketing in some way that isn't just cold calling, but we have no clue where to start. We have no idea what to do, what sort of content we're supposed to produce, how frequently, what channels. Do we need a website? Do we not need a website? Do we need Facebook, or do we need TikTok, or should we have a blog? There's just so many questions that I think always come up is in when it with anyone starting to attempt some digital marketing themselves. And I think, yeah, you're absolutely right, it can be completely yeah, daunting, I guess is the right word. And you just don't know where to start. So I think it's a great thing actually that you're doing, trying to kind of build some content that allows people to just jump in and have a go themselves. I think that's quite important. And I think a good thing to let kind of people know is that actually if you fail, it doesn't fucking matter. It really doesn't matter. There's a delete button for a reason, just have a go. Just have a look at your competitors, see what other people are doing, and just get going. If you wait until you've got a real in-depth understanding of who your audience is, or you've got the perfect strategy, or the perfect graphic template, or the perfect images, you'll never get started. You need a minimum viable product. If you know what you're selling and you know that your product's good, just crack on. And or service, it doesn't have to be a product or service. Just crack on and just get yourself out there. Would be my advice to those types of people.
Yeah, and I think it's about, we talk. It's funny because people always ask me, "What's the podcast called? What's this? What's that?" And I didn't even bother with all that fluff. I just I want to create the podcast. It still doesn't have a name. I'm going to eventually make a name and all that, but you can do all that afterwards. I think it is a testament to what you can do with marketing, because I looked at the objective. What was the objective? Start a conversation-based piece of content that helps educate other people, right? That was the goal. Okay, so do I need a name to do that? No. Do I need a vision to do that? Yes. Okay, there's the vision. Just articulated it. Now, how do I do it technically? Okay, so this is another technical skill that I need. I need it to do it. But once I go to the point where I can actually produce it, the rest of it doesn't really matter, right? Like, people put all these hurdles or these excuses, oh, I don't have this, or I don't have this budget, or I don't have this, or I don't have this. Or, something that I find really common, or have found really common, is that people do it for a bit and then they get some hate, and that leads on to my next question, and then they stop because it cripples them. It completely destroys them. And it's like getting punched in the gut, and it's like, oh my God, I put all this work and energy into being on camera, and I pushed myself, I did all this, and then this keyboard warrior, so to speak, or this person on the internet is now running their mouth, or they're just like saying, oh, you're this. I mean, I'm sure you've had it, but how did you tackle hate, quote unquote?
Yeah, well, I guess first of all, I think if you're going to produce any kind of content and public, put it out there, there's always going to be some dickhead that doesn't like it, or has something to say about it, or whatever, and you do have to be prepared for that. And I think a lot of the time, most of them are just bored little sad acts that have got nothing better to do, genuinely. So you just if it's somebody giving genuine feedback, like, I really don't think this resonates with your audience, oh, here, here's a bit of a tip or whatever, fine. Don't take that personally, and actually you can learn quite a lot from quote unquote hate, as you said. But if people are just genuinely being nasty, just, yeah, let it, just ignore it. And I know you shouldn't have to just ignore it, but I think sometimes you just block and move on. The amount of hate that I've had over the last 2 years is pretty incredible, to be fair. But you've got to just be resilient to it, and most of the time, you just have to remember all of those positive comments that you've had, positive feedback that you've had, all the positive interactions you've had with people. Usually, there'll be hundreds and hundreds of positive things and just one horrible message, and it's that one that you always get hung up on. And it's just really important to remember that that person is probably a little bit jealous, maybe a competitor, maybe he's got nothing better to do that day, maybe they've had a really bad day themselves, whatever it might be. Most of the time, it's not personal, really. It's just, they're an idiot, quite frankly. So yeah, so I'd never ever let that stop you from moving forward. If I had a done, yeah, I definitely wouldn't be where I am today with my business. I've been called all sorts of stuff. I think the worst one was I'm a monster raising a monster. That was my personal favourite. So
Okay. I mean,
I was like, thanks.
yeah, I mean, I think disconnecting yourself from it and understanding maybe where that person's coming from, if they have valid feedback, sure. But also, some people are just going to use you as that vent because they're like, oh my God, I hate the world and I happen to see your piece of content and this is now why I'm going to write this horrible thing. And I think, but also, I think the perspective can be that if you're doing that and you're getting some hate, you're actually doing something right because you're getting attention, right? Which is the goal of everything to do with marketing, right? Like, why do people do PR stunts? Why do people try and do X, Y, and Z? It's so they get attention, right? Because as we've discussed, the whole goal of marketing is to get attention from the right set of people. But at the beginning, you have to just sort of forge a path forward and sort of hope that it becomes something, right? And I think building a level of resilience. I know that Gary Vaynerchuk talks about cocooning yourself or being in the position where you don't listen to positive feedback or negative feedback at all, and you just do your thing. And I think that's another approach that you can take. And everything which I talk about in the podcast or in a piece of content or with you or whoever, it's not this is what you should do, right? It's hey, here's some suggestions of what has worked for me or a synopsis from someone else that is in the marketing space that says it slightly differently. And for the audience who's listening today, I think taking what we say as gospel is not the best idea because we're going to say it from our perspective, but you should take the bits you like and take the bits you don't, right? And not take the bits you don't, right? And I think it's the same with any marketing campaign because, people ask me all the time, it's like, we work across sectors, right? Like to an extent, I'm limiting how much I can niche and how much I can be, easy to sell to or easy to recommend to by saying that we don't specialize in a specific sector of video. And the reason why I do that is number one, because I like the idea of having every day different, but also number two, I'll pick up something from a hairdresser that will work really well for a restaurant, for example, right? And I think there's so much in marketing, and I mean, it leads on to my next point of view, or next thing that I'm sure you can chip in on. Should you niche down? Like, is that something that, and if you should, how much should you niche down? Because I think some people say niche, 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 but the example I always use is ask a wedding videographer how the pandemic was for them, because they niche down into this tiny box of no one's going to stop getting married. Well, technically a pandemic stopped people getting married, didn't it? So that's the issue, I think, can be when you niche down too much. So where's the line, would you say, in how much you niche down?
Yeah, for me, having a niche isn't necessarily the sector specific. So like for example, your niche is video production, right? So that essentially is your niche. But actually, in terms of the sector, you could cover any sector, and I think it depends on the business as well, because something like video production, actually, you don't have to be an expert in a specific sector or industry in order for you to capture that and produce great content for that sector. So I would totally agree from your point of view that you don't need to have that niche, and you've already got a niche because of what you do as a business. It's a form of marketing, but there's a whole arm of marketing that sits behind that actually you're not saying, oh yeah, we do all of this as well. So I think you can either have one or the other. Either you niche down into a sector or industry, or you niche down in the service that you offer. So some people will just focus on, we only do SEO, or we only do social media management, or we only do PPC or video production, or whatever it is, and that's what they do. Podcasts, some people just only work with other people on how to produce podcasts. And then on the other side, you've got, like, we offer most services that fall under the marketing umbrella, specifically in the sort of more digital marketing space. But we are niching down into the education sector. So that is where we've kind of can see really quick turnaround in results. We know that we can do really well in that sector. We understand it, and we know that we can kind of go straight in and quite quickly deliver some good results for those types of clients. mainly because that my background comes from that sort of education piece. And the clients that we've kind of built up over the last few years tend to be in that sector. However, we do still work with the commercial clients, and we do kind of actually they still probably make up a good 60% of our business. But because we've niched down into that, we are now seeing a big surge in the schools that are coming on board with us as well. So for me, I don't think having a niche necessarily means having an industry niche. It could be the niche is the service that you offer, which is exactly what you've got there. I mean, for you, you're right. You wouldn't want to go, oh yeah, I'll only do weddings, because you would have been pretty stuffed, wouldn't you? Or you know, there's quite a few that have kind of unfortunately gone down that path in various kind of offerings that they have, where they said, no, 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 this will soon pass. We're not going to move anything to a digital space. We're just going to sit it out, and unfortunately, they didn't survive. So I think it's important to understand where you're going, have a clear direction, but actually be able to quickly turn that around if you need to. That was a very long-winded way of saying yes, niche, but don't niche.
Yeah, absolutely. What you really described really well there was the fact that every business should have a level of pivot within the business, right? Because one of the issues that big
100%.
corporates have is, if you think about it as a massive tanker ship, if you decide you're going to go in this direction, you're going in that direction, and if you want to change course, you can, but it takes a very long time because it's huge and it just is a lot of weight and is complicated. But the thing is that I think a lot of businesses are starting to learn, especially as I've come up and started working with more clients and really talking to them on a one-to-one basis to understand their business a lot more, is they have backup plans, or they have things they can pivot into really quickly, which gives them an option. I think the pandemic was one thing, and we just used the pandemic as the nearest example, but it could be a recession, it could be a war, it could be so many different things that has forced people to be like, actually, if this isn't very profitable at the time, or this isn't working very well at the time, we have to go over here, right? And one of the fortunate positions that we have as a company, because we can do podcasting, we can do video, we can do technically blog writing if you tweak it, because you can transcribe the video, and that it gives us a lot of flexibility to suddenly decide we want to just focus on podcasting, for example. Or, if maybe it's not the right climate, or it's got illegal, like it was for a couple of months in 2020, to do video production, suddenly you have this new thing where you have to resolve it. You have to still make money and still generate content for your clients and etc. And I think it's something which if you don't know how to pivot, you're going to find quite challenging. I mean, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on a quote from a good friend of mine from a couple of years ago, who said that it's not businesses that change or pivot, it's business owners that survive like big things like a pandemic. I mean, have you found in the years you've been in business and the experience you have that that's true, or is that saying slightly twisted in the respect to, is it sometimes true, is it sometimes not? Like, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's dependent on the size of the business. Like if it's an owner managed business like mine is at the moment, one day I will sell it for multi-millions of pounds, and that'll be a different story. But at the moment, I own the business, and I also essentially manage the business. Not massively. I am starting to take a step back. I've got a team manager in place now. They can all do the job. They can all account manage clients, etc., etc. But if you're an owner managed business, it's very easy to go, yeah, fuck it. We're not gonna do that now. We're gonna do this because we need to survive. We need to get through this. I need to pay all your wages, for example. So we're gonna change the way we work, and that's quite easy to do, I think. And I think it does need to be led from the top, from the owner. But if you're in a multinational or a big corporate, I think that's probably, yeah, not the case at all. I think it's very much dependent on the workforce, on the teams, and how what their skill base is. If you've built up a massive team that are only skilled in one specific thing, trying to turn that round overnight, as you said about trying to turn an oil tanker previously, yeah, it's just not going to happen. And really, the change, whilst it's led from the top, it really is dependent on the teams and the workforce to make that change happen. So I think it depends on the size of the business. And of course, if it's just you, if you're like an entrepreneur that's just you, selling services, or you've got contractors that you work with, again, it's very easy to go, yeah, actually, I need to make the change now. And likewise, if you're an owner of a owner-led business that doesn't do that, then you're probably going to see your business stagnate. And if you did that through lockdown, probably don't have a business right now, at a guess. So yeah, I think that's probably right. If it's an owner-led business, yeah.
I think, yeah, and as I say, I think it's something that you have to either learn to pivot or at least put onto your personal priority list to develop yourself so you can. And I think even in a corporate society or in a corporate world, yes, it takes longer to pivot, yes, it takes longer to change, but they arguably are stronger to deal with a problem, right? Because there's larger infrastructure there, they've arguably got more cash flow, so on, so on, so on. Now, I'm not saying that can't come crumbling down, of course, right? That, of course, we've seen it across the board where there is a set of people who have unfortunately lost their business across the board, right? Everyone from one-man bands all the way up to corporates. But I think the important point to understand as someone who does work with different variations of sizes of business is you need to develop a strategy and develop a service necessarily that will serve each sector, right? So maybe that's the budget that you ask for. Maybe that's how much you do for the client. Maybe that's how you control the approval process of the client, right? Like if someone's very time poor, but arguably money rich, okay, so you're going to have a different process for someone who's got more time, I imagine, right? And I think, from an internal point of view, how did you build the point of understanding who was best to do this, and this, right? Because a lot of the time when we work with contractors or subcontractors or freelancers, I have a specific set of people who I know are very specifically good at, you're very good at this, you're very good at this, you're very good at this. I imagine you have a similar thing in your network or your team. But how did you really start building that culture and that understanding? Especially, did you move to remote? Were you always remote? Like, was there issues there? Because I imagine that's part of the business which people are going to struggle with as they scale, right? Because if they do marketing correctly, they get loads of work in, suddenly they're going to realise, I can't do everything and grow the business.
Yep, which is exactly what happened to me. Yeah, and I think so we did have an office. We had an office in Havant, in the building of one of our clients actually. And basically over lockdown, it was only us at the time, me and my business partner. We didn't have anyone else, and we decided not to continue with the office. Basically, we were locked down. I've got 3 kids. I just wasn't, in the position to go in even after everyone was kind of, oh yeah, you can go back to offices. Schools still weren't back, so yeah, we let the office go at that point. So it just meant that everyone that came on after all worked from home anyway. But that has been a interesting to get used to, because previously, whenever I've worked before or businesses I've had before, I've always had an office, been in an office, and been very in close proximity to the people that I was managing, or working with, which makes communication a lot easier. But essentially what we did is just put in lots of different ways of communicating, and processes, I guess, to make sure that was still done really smoothly. So for example, we use Slack, so we all chat to each other on Slack pretty much every couple of minutes, like chucking questions in. We split out by client, so we can very quickly go, oh, who's doing this piece of work, or who's working on this, and it gets responded to really quickly as if you were sitting in an office. So that's been a really helpful tool, and it's free as well. Slack is. So if anyone isn't using Slack and you've got remote workers, get on it, because it is so good. It's such a useful tool, and I'd not even heard of it actually. It was Katie, who is our team manager, who is currently on maternity leave, who came up with it. And yeah, I just kind of fell in love with it as soon as it went in. It made life so much easier to just chat to the team. And then we implemented, kind of every morning we do a 10-minute huddle, so we can just chat to each other before the day starts, kind of motivate each other, just chat rubbish usually, and answer any questions that if any client work and stuff like that comes up, and we can do that at that point. And then we have a weekly kind of full team meeting as well. And then quarterly, we actually meet up together somewhere, that everyone can get to. But we are literally all over now. So my latest hire, who starts on the first of April, is in Hull, so which I'm down in Fareham near Southampton. So that's quite a long way. It's about a 6-hour drive. We've got SJ who's in Droitwich. I've got most of everyone else. So we've got Katie's in like Romsey Way, Southampton Way, and then we've got two, Sarah and Callum, sort of more towards me, Southsea and that sort of area. And then we've got Jessie who's in Essex. So it's quite a widespread team now. But actually, they all work really well. And Jessie is actually an apprentice as well, so she's absolutely brand spanking new to marketing, but is still progressing really well and able to learn remotely, which is cool. But I think we came from an easy place because they all came on knowing that it was going to be a remote position straight away. And our kind of team culture is more about the people than it is anything else. Like, I genuinely believe that if I look after the team, they will look after me and they will look after the clients. Like, so really, we have very flexible working, come and go as you please kind of thing. As long as the work gets done and clients are happy, you manage your own time. And I think it is massively about that culture, and building a culture that trusts people to just get on with the job, even if they're not sat in front of you. So yeah, so I think we've done quite well at building that. But I'm no expert by any stretch in moving from one way of working to the other, because it's not something we really had to do. We just kind of built that. That's the culture from the ground up. So it's been quite helpful from that point of view.
Yeah, and I think it's something which a lot of businesses are going to be going through, either going to be going through or have gone through, right? And are in the process of like hashing out the bumps. And by no means does that mean the bumps are completely fixed, right? In that respect, because there will be a world where it does go wrong. There will be hurdles. There will be issues. And it's really interesting to hear about that perspective of everything remote, and the fact that I think that a lot of people actually prefer that, especially when it is quite okay. Your quote unquote stuff to do is very solo, right? Like the only time my guys would really technically need to be together in theory would be if we were on a production, but in most cases we would go to the client anyway. So it's like, actually, do we need a shared office? Maybe not so much necessarily, right? And is that better for them? Do they enjoy it better, etc.?
Yeah, exactly. I think some people do, I know, well, I don't think, I know some people do prefer an office environment. I totally get that. But, I think that's for the individual to then decide where they want to work and where they want to accept a job opportunity. If they don't want to work remotely, and then they apply for somewhere that's remote work only, they're probably going to struggle. And vice versa. Some people that only want to work remote, and then they end up finding themselves in a place where they want everyone in the office when actually it's totally unnecessary. So I think it is just about finding that balance, isn't it? And finding a culture that works for you and your business. I mean, we're a marketing agency. We're lucky because we basically can say whatever the fuck we like, and everyone just accepts it because we're a marketing agency. Don't know why that works, but it just does. But if you're, a business that's I don't know, in finance or anything like that, you've you're not going to be able to do that in the same way as we can. So yeah, it's you've got to find that balance of the culture.
So yeah, I think from a remote point of view, it's really powerful, right? Like, talking from the perspective of, you can work across the board and you can work to so many different clients because of what you do. It can be really powerful. But I'm conscious of time, so I think let's wrap up soon. But what I like to do towards the end of the podcast is to give you an opportunity, if you did want to ask me anything, or did want to throw in a topic for us to discuss before we do the outro bits. Is there anything? Doesn't have to be. It's just in case you did have something.
Let me think. I don't think so. I guess yeah. I mean, using I guess throwing it over to you, what you do, um, using kind of video production and things like that. I think that's one area that a lot of people are lacking quite significantly. Um, so I guess from like we use various contractors to do that for our clients. But trying to get across to people that actually you need some fresh content that is unique to you is absolutely essential. Like, and it doesn't have to cost the earth. Like, we got all of our, like, my website is just us basically. The video is of us, so we got a load of videography done, we got a load of photography done, and we use that in all of our social media. We use it across our website and everything else. And people always comment on, how our website really gives off the vibe of who we are as a business. And I think you can't do that without having some footage of you. But getting that across to people I find quite difficult. So I guess I feel like I'm doing the interview now. I guess from your point of view, how do you kind of communicate how important that is to people and like why they should have video?
I mean, the simple answer is some people don't need it at all, right? Like if what you sell or what you are trying to market is very easy to understand, you don't necessarily need it. But the easiest principle is people buy from people, right? Exactly what you were just discussing. And you need a physical way to connect with those people. You need people, and the reason why you should use video over photos necessarily, photos have their place, they're great, etc. But they are to do with, or it is to do with, you're gonna get able to get your personality across. You know, people are gonna, if they've watched this whole episode, they'll get to know me and you. They kind of get to gauge in their own head, okay, is Colton someone is someone I want to work with, or is Jade someone I want to work with, etc. And you can't, there's no other medium like this that you can use that isn't a meeting, that doesn't trade time. Like, you put time into this podcast, but then it sits online for as long as I choose for it to sit online for. And video is the only medium which you can do that with. So I think, in answer to your question, that's the real ISP of video. And the reason why people, I think, and why we're seeing a massive resurgence in video as a concept as well, and why the social media platforms want short form, they want this, you know, the rise of TikTok, and I'm sure we could do another podcast on short form and how to go about that, and you know.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I think 100%. You're bang on. Like, video stops you trading that time of sitting with somebody, going through your product, your services, and everything else. And some people might say, "Oh, well, it's not very personal," but actually, when you get to a point in business, your time is very, very precious. So you want those people that are coming through to have conversations with you to be 100% qualified already. You don't want them coming to you asking the same questions over and over and over again. And if you're finding that as a business, generally speaking, it's because you don't have the right content, or you're not explaining yourself well enough in your marketing. And one surefire way of making sure you explain yourself well in your marketing, answer all the questions that you might get, and stop trading your time is by having a bloody video. So I love it. I honestly, I just think it's crazy when people just can't see that benefit. Um, but it's literally, no one's going to be as passionate about your business as you are. So if you can get that across on your website by just simply having like an explainer video on there or whatever, then why would you not do that? Why would you want to waste your time keep talking to people that don't really get it because you're not speaking to them properly, like on your website or socials or whatever it might be. Like, you want those people to be qualified when they come to you, so that you're not wasting your time, you're not wasting their time as well, and that you can do business and get on with what you're good at, right? So yeah, no, I totally agree with you.
100%. 100%. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jade, for
No
the
problem.
time. And for those people who are interested in seeing some of your work, seeing some of your posts, where can they reach out?
Well, I'd say LinkedIn, but people might not want to follow me on LinkedIn, but sometimes it causes a little bit of a stir. But yeah, follow me on LinkedIn. Check out our website, rebellionmarketing.co.uk. I tend to do quite a lot of talks as well, so yeah, you'll probably just Google me and you'll find some crap talk that I've done if you're interested. So yeah.
So I hope you took value from that episode, ladies and gents. I found it really, really valuable, and it was a really great conversation. I'll leave Jay's links in the description down below for those of you who may be interested in hearing more from her. Thank you ever so much for coming back and watching this episode once again, and I'll see you next week with a brand new guest, where we're going to be talking about some new exciting topics that I'm not even sure they're actually what they're going to be yet. But yeah, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be fun. It's going to be brilliant, and I'll see you very, very soon.